So you're trying to shred some chicken or meat for a recipe, but it's just not getting ripped apart as fast as you would like it to. And maybe you tried a few tricks, putting the meat in the fridge for a couple hours, microwaving it, etc. But if none of those tricks have worked for you, then today's trick is going to be a game changer for you. Because today, I'm going to show you the ultimate trick that's going to make you shred your meat faster than you ever thought possible before. It's going to be so good. So let's get started. Hi, I'm the host and this is my channel. So click the link in the description and subscribe today. Alright, so let's jump into today's video. Let's start off by talking about why this trick works so well. Because it all starts with one simple ingredient: baking soda. Now don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into a health food channel, but I do want to explain why the baking soda is so important to the process. The reason why is because the baking soda is going to help break down the bonds between muscle fibers and fascia within the meat. This is very similar to how a marinade works, except for the fact that marinating your meat takes a lot more time. In some cases up to 24 hours. Now, the baking soda trick that I'm about to show you can work in as little as 15 minutes, and in most cases, you'll be waiting less than an hour. Now, while the baking soda helps break down the bonds between the muscle fibers and the fascia, the acidity from the vinegar or lemon juice is going to help break down the proteins and loosen up the meat. The science behind it all is kind of complicated, but basically, the acidic pH level of the vinegar or lemon juice helps break down the protein structure of the meat, and the baking soda helps to denature the protein, which both together are going to help tenderize and shred your meat faster than you ever thought possible. Okay, so now that we know the science behind it, let me show you exactly how this works. To begin, I have a 3-pound meat that I'm going to be shredding for some pulled meat sandwiches later this week. The first thing that I did was cut the fat off of the meat. I did this because the fat will render out during the cooking process, and that fat can sometimes separate and get in the way of the meat. Now, in most cases, you really don't need to do this. But since I'm making pulled meat sandwiches, I wanted to reduce the amount of fat in this dish. Next, we're going to move over to our mixing bowl, and we're going to combine our ingredients for the mixture. First, add half of a ripe avocado, 2 tablespoons of baking soda, and 1/4 cup of either vinegar or lemon juice. Now, I prefer to use apple cider vinegar, but white vinegar works just as well, and I'll tell you why later on in the video. Next, add in 4 garlic cloves. Now, if you don't like garlic, feel free to omit this, but I highly suggest that you don't because the garlic adds a ton of flavor to the meat. Let's add in 1 teaspoon of kosher salt. Now, if you want to be fancy, you can use flaky sea salt, but honestly, kosher salt works perfectly fine, and it's a lot cheaper. Next, with your whisk, thoroughly combine the ingredients until the mixture looks like this. Now, if you're wondering if this mixture is safe to eat, it absolutely is. But if you are concerned about eating the mixture, you can strain it before using. Next, add the pork to the bowl and toss the pork in the mixture until it's completely coated. Now, if you're working with poultry or beef, you can cut the meat into smaller pieces, but I like to keep these larger chunks because they're easier to handle and they also shred faster. Once the meat has been coated in the mixture, cover the bowl and refrigerate for at least 15 minutes. Now, I told you that this recipe can work in as little as 15 minutes, but depending on the type of meat and the size of the meat, you may have to wait a little bit longer. For example, this pork shoulder took about 45 minutes to an hour to fully break down, but when I made pulled chicken with this same recipe, it only took about 15 minutes. Once you think your meat is ready, go ahead and remove a chunk from the bowl and place it on a cutting board. Now, if you're working with chicken, you'll notice that the chicken falls apart pretty easily once it's been covered in the mixture. And if you're working with tougher cuts of meat such as meat brisket, you're still going to notice that the meat has softened quite a bit. And that means it's ready to shred. To shred the meat, you can use 2 forks. but I prefer to use my KitchenAid mixer fitted with the paddle attachment. If you don't have a stand mixer, you can use a hand mixer. But if you don't have access to either of those tools, you can always use your hands. Now, regardless of what tool you use to shred your meat, the end result is going to be so worth it. As you're shredding your meat, you'll notice that the meat is going to start separating into long strips. Just continue to rip the meat apart until it reaches the consistency that you're looking for. Now, I like to shred my pulled meat a little bit finer, whereas I like my shredded chicken to be in larger strips. So you can basically shred the meat however you want it. If you're looking for another great way to shred chicken, check out the video that's linked above. This is another great method that I use to shred chicken, especially when I need it to be in larger strips. Once the meat is finished shredding, I like to run it through a strainer. Now, this is mostly for cosmetic purposes because it removes any chunks of fat that might have been mixed in with the meat. You don't have to do this, but I like the end result better when I do. Now, when it comes to using the vinegar or lemon juice, there is a slight difference between the two. The acidity in both the vinegar and lemon juice is going to help break down the structure of the meat. However, the flavor of the meat is going to be slightly different when you use one or the other. The apple cider vinegar is going to impart a stronger, more pungent flavor to your meat, whereas the lemon juice is going to give your meat a more subtle, lemony flavor. Either way, both are delicious, and they both work perfectly fine. It really comes down to personal preference. One last thing that I want to mention. This recipe is a great way to use up leftover chicken or pork that you may have in your fridge. This is a fantastic way to repurpose that meat and transform it into something that's even better than it was to begin with. So let's recap everything that we learned today. Baking soda breaks down the bonds between the muscle fibers and fascia within the meat. The acidity from the vinegar or lemon juice helps break down the proteins and loosens up the meat. The garlic adds tons of flavor to the meat. Kosher salt is used as a seasoning. Avocado adds healthy fats and moisture to the meat. And lastly, your leftover meat should be shredded using either a mixer or your hands. And there you have it. You have now mastered the ultimate trick for shredding meat faster than you ever thought possible. Like I mentioned earlier, if you need another great tricks, check out the video that's linked above. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the like button. I'll see you next time. Bye.